Former FBI Director James Comey made his first court appearance in Virginia today, charged with threatening President Trump. A grand jury indicted Comey yesterday over a social media post he made last year. The photo, which is on your screen, shows seashells and rocks forming the numbers 8647. Comey later deleted the post. The Justice Department says those numbers constitute a threat because 86 is something to get rid of, and the president is America's 47th president. Comey was not arraigned today. He did not enter a plea. The judge hearing the case denied the Justice Department's attempts to set conditions for his release, saying they weren't necessary.
Former FBI Director James Comey has now appeared in federal court in Virginia over charges connected to an alleged threat against the president, and the case has opened a much larger debate about the Justice Department, the FBI, and whether federal law enforcement is being used for real accountability or political revenge. Prosecutors say the case comes from an older Instagram post that they claim encouraged violence against Donald Trump, while Comey denies any wrongdoing, and his lawyer is already preparing to argue that this is a vindictive prosecution, meaning a case brought to punish him because he has long been one of Trump's most visible critics. And that is why this moment is so explosive. This is not only about one post, one indictment, or one courtroom appearance. It is about a sitting president's Justice Department pursuing a former FBI director who once investigated him, while Trump publicly celebrates the indictment and calls for more investigations into other officials who crossed him. The next detail shows why this case is being treated as more than a normal threat prosecution. Now let's see the part where the Justice Department announces the 2-count indictment tied to the Instagram post.
The Trump administration has indicted former FBI Director James Comey for a second time. It's over a photograph that Comey took, which officials allege was a threat aimed at President Donald Trump. Last May, Comey posted a photo on social media of seashells on a beach, writing out the numbers 8647. The Justice Department says that's a reference to removing or assassinating Trump. This is the administration's second attempt to prosecute one of Trump's biggest political opponents. Last September, the Justice Department brought charges against Comey.
On April 27, 2026, the Justice Department announced that a federal grand jury had returned a 2-count indictment against Comey. According to the script, the charges involve threatening the president and transmitting threats in interstate commerce. The alleged basis is an Instagram post and related conduct that prosecutors say crossed into criminal threat territory. Federal threat laws are real, and they exist for an important reason. Public officials should not have to face credible threats of violence. But applying those laws to a social media post from a former FBI director is a serious prosecutorial decision, especially when the alleged target is the same president who has publicly wanted Comey punished for years. This is where the case becomes less about Comey personally and more about whether the Justice Department is being used fairly. That is the central tension. This next clip shows why Comey's past controversies are central to how both sides are reacting to this case.
I'm here to give you an update on the FBI's investigation of Secretary Clinton's use of a personal email system during her time as Secretary of State. After a tremendous amount of work over the last year, the FBI is completing its investigation and referring the matter to the Department of Justice for a prosecutive decision. What I want to do today is 3 things. I want to tell you what we did, I want to tell you what we found, and I want to tell you what we're recommending to the Department of Justice. This is going to be an unusual statement in at least a couple of ways. First, I'm going to include more detail about our process than I ordinarily would, because I think the American people deserve those details in a case of intense public interest.
James Comey is not a simple hero in this story. He is controversial. Democrats and Republicans have criticized him for different decisions throughout his career. His handling of the Clinton email investigation angered one side. His role in the Russia investigation enraged Trump and his allies. His memos about conversations with Trump became part of one of the defining political battles of Trump's first term. So this is not about pretending Comey is beyond scrutiny. The real question is whether this indictment would have happened in a normal Justice Department environment, or whether it happened because Comey is one of Trump's political enemies. The wider pattern involving former FBI officials makes the timing even harder to ignore. That question becomes more serious when you look at the broader pattern. Here is where the story becomes bigger, because the indictment appears alongside wider pressure on former FBI officials.
The Justice Department has fired several FBI agents who took part in investigating President Trump. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland has the latest.
In controversial fashion, allegedly for being associated with an investigation known as Arctic Frost, Arctic Frost was an investigation by the then Biden-led Department of Justice and special prosecutor to look into efforts to overturn the 2020 election results and install alternate, some would say fake electors in their place.
This Comey indictment is not happening by itself. It comes alongside reported terminations and personnel actions affecting FBI staff connected to past Trump investigations. It also comes as reports describe probes targeting other former FBI leaders, including Christopher Wray, who was actually appointed by Trump himself. That matters because the pattern appears to extend beyond one individual. It begins to look like a wider campaign against the people who took part in investigations Trump disliked. Trump's own public reaction is what makes the line between accountability and retaliation look dangerously thin. Let's look at the report that shows Trump openly celebrating the Comey indictment and pushing for more investigations.
The country is still processing yesterday's indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. The president called Comey a dirty cop and says more indictments could be coming. Erica Brown has details from the White House.
Dick, former FBI Director James Comey was indicted on federal charges just days before the statute of limitations to file charges related to a 2020 congressional testimony was set to expire. And it comes as the president has openly pressured the Justice Department to pursue action against his political opponents. President Trump celebrated the Justice Department's indictment of former FBI Director James Comey.
Trump has not been subtle about this. According to the script, he has publicly celebrated the Comey indictment, pushed for additional investigations into other former officials, and made clear that he believes using DOJ and FBI resources against people who investigated him is justified. That is what makes this situation so dangerous. When the president openly celebrates the indictment of a former FBI director who investigated him, and then pushes for more probes into others from that same institutional world, the line between law enforcement and retaliation becomes extremely thin. The bigger institutional question is whether DOJ and FBI independence can survive this kind of pressure. This part explains why DOJ and FBI independence is now at the center of the entire controversy.
Probably, I don't know, based on what I'm seeing out there, the people like Comey have created tremendous danger, I think, for politicians and others.
The independence of the Justice Department and the FBI is not just a nice tradition. It is part of the structure that allows the public to believe investigations are based on evidence and law, not personal revenge. That independence has never been perfect, and American history includes real examples of political abuse inside law enforcement. But what makes this moment different is how open it is. The targeting is not hidden, the celebration is public, the pressure is direct, the people being pursued are connected to investigations of the sitting president. That creates a precedent that could last beyond this administration and damage the way federal law enforcement functions for years. Inside the FBI, the chilling effect may be even more damaging than the public fight itself. Now watch how the chilling effect inside the FBI could become more damaging than the public legal fight. The FBI is made up of career agents, analysts, staff, and officials who are supposed to follow the evidence wherever it leads. But what happens when those people watch former leaders indicted, colleagues fired, and careers damaged because they participated in lawful investigations that later became politically inconvenient? They learn a lesson. Some resign, some retire early, some avoid politically sensitive cases, some stop pushing as hard. Some begin thinking less about what the evidence requires and more about how a future president might punish them for doing their job. This is how an institution weakens without one dramatic public collapse. That is how institutions decline, not always through one sudden breakdown, but through fear. If agents believe that lawful investigative work today could make them targets tomorrow, then the quality and independence of federal law enforcement suffer. The most capable people may leave first because they have other options. Those who stay may become more cautious, and over time an agency built to investigate without fear becomes an agency shaped by political survival. The legal theory behind the indictment will now become one of the most important parts of the case. This is where the legal fight becomes critical, as courts weigh true threats against protected political speech. Threat statutes require careful judgment because courts must separate true threats from protected political speech, sarcasm, rhetoric, or poor taste. Prosecutors must decide whether the words are actually criminal or merely offensive. In a politically neutral environment, that decision is already delicate. In this environment, where the alleged victim is the president and the defendant is a longtime critic who once investigated him, the decision becomes even more suspicious to critics. That does not automatically make the indictment invalid, but it does mean courts will likely examine it closely. The final danger is that a weak or politically motivated case could damage DOJ credibility far beyond Comey. Legal analysts across different political backgrounds have reportedly raised concerns about whether this is the type of case prosecutors would normally bring. That skepticism matters. If the case looks legally weak, and if courts later decide prosecutors went too far, then the damage will not be limited to one failed indictment. It will damage the credibility of the Justice Department itself. A prosecution that appears politically motivated and then collapses in court becomes evidence for everyone who already believes the system is being used as a weapon. The Christopher Wray angle makes the pattern even harder to ignore. Now see how the Christopher Wray angle makes the pattern even harder for critics to dismiss. Wray was not a Democratic appointee. Trump chose him after firing Comey. If even Trump's own former FBI director can later become a target because the bureau under his leadership did things Trump disliked, then future FBI directors will understand the message clearly. Loyalty to the law may not protect you from political punishment. That is dangerous because the FBI director's job requires independence from the president's personal interests. If every director fears future retaliation, the position itself becomes politically compromised. This is where the precedent becomes alarming. If one administration uses federal law enforcement to pursue officials from a previous investigative period, future administrations can copy the same pattern. Once that door opens, every FBI director, prosecutor, or senior law enforcement official may wonder whether a future president will investigate them for decisions they made in good faith. That moves the United States closer to a system where law enforcement becomes a tool of political revenge instead of an independent institution. The political consequences are also obvious. Democrats and progressive groups will use this indictment as proof that Trump is weaponizing the Justice Department. Their message will be simple: the president is using federal power to punish the people who investigated him. That message could reach voters beyond the Democratic base, especially voters who may not personally like Comey but still believe the justice system should not be used for revenge. In close midterm races, that kind of message could matter. The question now is which interpretation will hold. One version says the DOJ is simply holding a powerful former official accountable for conduct that crossed a legal line. The other version says the DOJ is being used to punish a political enemy, with the indictment functioning as part of a broader revenge campaign against former FBI leaders and investigators. The courts will decide the legal questions, but the institutional damage is already happening. Trust is being tested now. FBI morale is being affected now. Public confidence is being strained now. Finally, this part shows what viewers should watch next as the Comey case moves through court. Going forward, the signs to watch are clear. Watch how judges handle the early motions in Comey's case, especially if the defense argues vindictive prosecution or challenges whether the Instagram post qualifies as a true threat. Watch whether more former FBI officials, including Wray or others, become formal targets of investigations or indictments. Watch whether any Republicans publicly express concern about the use of DOJ power against former law enforcement officials. And watch whether current or former FBI employees begin speaking more openly about morale, fear, resignations, and the chilling effect on investigations. The bottom line is simple. The Justice Department has indicted a former FBI director over an Instagram post. The president publicly celebrated that indictment. Other former FBI leaders and staff tied to Trump-related investigations are reportedly facing probes, firings, subpoenas, or pressure. And legal analysts are questioning whether this reflects normal prosecution or political direction. Each piece matters on its own, but together they create a larger picture. A presidency testing whether federal law enforcement is still an independent check on power, or whether it can be turned into an instrument of presidential revenge. This is not a background story. This is a central test of the rule of law. If the Justice Department can be used to punish the people who investigated the president, then every future official will learn from it. If the courts push back, if Congress demands answers, and if the public refuses to accept revenge prosecutions as normal, then the system may still hold. But for now, the Comey indictment has become more than a legal case. It has become a warning sign about the direction of American democracy and the future independence of the FBI.